Hi guys, this is Leela. Welcome to my channel leelawebdev. So we have learned about the two React hooks in our earlier videos, that is useState and useEffect. So we have used it so much very often that now I think that the people who are following my videos are pretty comfortable with the two hooks, that is useState and also useEffect. So when we need to use it and how many different ways we can use the state and also the useEffect, these all things you people have understood. Now it's time for us to jump on to the another hook, that is useRef hook. So what is the use of this hook and when we need to use this hook and where it exactly matches into our or where it exactly useful in our applications, in the React application. Let's try to see. So let's learn about the another React hook, that is nothing but useRef hook. This is one of the easiest hooks. So this is one of the easiest, just like the useState and useEffect. This is also easiest one only. Let's try to see. What are refs? So first we need to understand what are refs. So we use the useRef hook to create something called a ref. So here what I can say is constant. So here the ref will be created using a variable constant myref is equal to useRef of 23. So here also we are passing initial value for this one. So like this to create something. But what actually is a ref? Ref stands for reference. And essentially it's like a box into which we can put any data. So it's something like an object or it's something like a store, we can store the data. So here ref means it will create something like a memory allocation for you where you can store the data inside this one. You can store whatever the data it may be, object or anything. So like a box in which you can put any data that we want to be preserved between the renders. So the component re-renders will be happen all the time, right? When we try to update the state variable. So whenever any state updates occurs, the component re-renders. So if you want to preserve the data between the renders, so if you want to preserve the data means if you want to have the previous rendered data or anything, so then you can save the data in a ref. So that is a main usage of this one. In technical terms, when we use ref, React will give us an object with a mutable current property. So technically if you want to talk means, so when you try to create a variable with a useRef, so you will be having a current property into that one. So that means it will have an object. So useRef, if you create a variable, that variable will return, that useRef will return a object. In that object, you will be having current property. And using that current property, we can write any data into this current property, and also we can read from it using that current property. So let's say that this is the myref. Okay, we have created previously, right? Myref. And in that I told you, right, it is a memory location or a box, something like where you can store any type of data. Here I am storing a integer value, that is nothing but number value 23. So that 23, if you want to access that value means we can access it through the current property. So myref.current is equal to 1000. So here I am updating the value. If you want to get the data value means myref.current. So we can write and read from the ref using .current property. I already told you that whenever you create a variable, myref is equal to useRef, if you trade means useRef will return an object. In that object it will have a current property, and using that current property you can write the data and also you can read the data also. In this small example, the current property was first set to the initial value of 23 and we then changed it to 1000. So we can say that this current property is actually mutable. So that means we can update the value, we can change the value. So that is the reason it is a mutable. What's really special about the refs is that they are persisted across the renders. So the current property value stays the same between the multiple renders. So just like the state. So here what is the special about the ref value? So initial value it has been rendered as 23. So when the component re-renders, so the ref current value has updated to 1000, right? When the component re-renders, so the ref value will not be initialized with the, again it will not be initialized. So it will stay with the previous value only, that is 1000. So that is the thing which I want to explain you. So this gives us two big use cases for refs. First, as we just said, that we can use refs to create variables that will stay the same between the renders, and useful examples for this are preserving the previous state. So this is the main thing. So refs are used to create to preserve the previous state. So previous state and the use previous state are storing the ID of a timeout function. The second use case is actually far more important, which is to select and store the DOM elements. So whenever you are trying to select a DOM element, so the second use case will be actually far more important. So just like the ID of a set timeout. So whenever you are using the set timeout and if you want to save the ID of that set timeout means you can use the ref. A DOM element is also a piece of data that we want to store and preserve across renders. Just like the ID of a set timeout, the DOM element, the return value of the DOM element is also a piece of data, and we can also save that, store it and preserve in the render across the renders. Now refs are usually for data that is not rendered individual output of the component. So usually refs only appear in event handlers or effects. So now what I am trying to tell you is, so refs are usually for data not to render. So it is not used to render the output of the component, whereas state is used to render the output of the component. So just refs are only appear in the event handlers or effects, but not in the JSX. You will not use it in the JSX. Of course, we can use the refs inside the JSX too, but usually it's not ideal place for that one. If you need data to participate in the visual output of the component, so if you want the data to show it in the visual output, that means in the JSX means that a good side actually you need a state, not a ref. So whenever you want to try to use the variable in a JSX data means then the correct is the nothing but use the state, not the ref. Just like with the state, you are not allowed to write or read the current property in render logic, as that would create an undesirable side effect. So that is nothing. So in render logic, so we should never write to update and mutate the data. So this will create an infinite loop when you try to update the state. In the same scenario, the ref also you should not write or read the current property in the render logic. We usually perform these type of mutations inside a user effect. So whenever you try to change the data or anything, so we usually do these type of things in a use effect hook. These two state and ref are in fact quite similar. So what I want to tell you is, so these two, useState and also the useRef, are quite similar if you try to observe. Let's now analyze what they have in common and what is the difference between these two. State versus ref. In a way we can say that refs are like state but with less powers. So what I can say is refs and states are nothing but, useState are nothing but same only, but they will have with less powers. What they have in common is, both the state and refs are persisted across the renders. So this is one thing, state and refs, they are persisted across the renders. So the initial value will be initialized only in the initial render only. Whenever the re-renders happens, so it will not be initialized again. The component remembers these values even after re-rendering. So that is one thing. The big difference is that updating the state causes the component to re-render, while updating the refs does not re-render. So this is the main difference. So whenever we update this state using something like set state, something like that, when you use it, immediately the component re-render happens. So when you try to update the ref means yref.current like that, if you are not trying to update it, the component will not render again. The big takeaway from this is that we use state when we want to store data that should re-render the component, and refs for data that should only be remembered by the component over time but never re-render it. So here when we need to use the state is, so when we want to store the data and whenever we are updating the data, if we want the component to re-render means then we use the state, and we use the refs for the data that should only be remembered, but when we are trying to update that ref that we should not never re-render it means then we use the refs. So this is the main distinction between the state and the refs, but there are also some minor ones. We already learned that the state is immutable but refs are not. So this one we have learned it. Also state is updated asynchronously. So the useState, the set state, we have learned about this one. It is updated asynchronously, which means that we cannot use the new state immediately after updating it. With refs on the other hand, updates are not asynchronous. So refs, updating this refs is synchronous, as we can actually read a new current property immediately after updating it. So this is the table which we have the common things between the state and the refs. So persist across the renders means, so SS. So these both are persisted across the renders. So only first time initial render the value will be initialized, all the time it will remember the data what you have updated it. And updating across the re-render means whenever we update the data, whether the component re-renders or not means in the state it will re-render, but in the ref it will not do. Immutable means, so here the state is immutable, whereas the refs is not immutable. So we can update it using the dot current property. Asynchronous updates means, so whether the state variable is an asynchronous update, so we cannot use the data immediately after updating it. Whereas refs is a synchronous one, so you can immediately use the data after immediately updating it. So this is the main difference between the useState and the useRef. In the next video, we will try to see about the practical implementation of this useRef, where we can actually use this one in our React.js application. Hope you understood about this one. So this Slideshare link I will be providing in the description below of this video. So if anybody is interested in this Slideshare link, so you can have it. So that's it guys about the useRef hook introduction. If you have any doubts or any suggestions, please post the comments below to this video. And if you like this video, please do support me by subscribing to my channel. Thank you.